Okay, so where we left off this morning, we had begun looking at the first of the three meritorious practices, which is the practice of generosity. And mainly it's because as human beings, we rely on the necessities of clothing, food, and so forth to survive and be happy. So our emotional experience of happiness is tied to these material aspects. So the Buddha, in considering, how should he help people? So it's not just all about technical Dharma teachings. It's about how to actually help people improve their lives and so forth. He taught when he was faced mainly with the general public, he would teach them about how should you practice or what should you do in order to uproot poverty, in order to tackle poverty, and therefore ensure that you have the necessities of life. So where do these material necessities come from? And the Buddhist teachings tell us that it comes from our past wholesome acts of giving material things to others and bringing them benefit. So with all the material things we have, if we hoard them and we don't share them, once we die, we cannot actually use them. Even if, our will says, bury all my stuff with me in my grave, we still don't really have any access to them. So on the other hand, if we enjoy all of our possessions selfishly, that is, we use it all up, once they're used up, they're gone. So this is what a wise person who knows about karma would not do. Now, a wise person, such as yourselves, would know that you should allocate a portion of possessions to carry out deeds of generosity or acts of generosity. And the aim is to bring benefit to those who are on the receiving end of our gifts. And in this life, when we make offerings and gifts to others, the giver reaps the benefit of happiness in their future lives, while the receiver reaps immediate benefit in this life. So it's a win-win situation for both the giver and the receiver. Now, the material resources that occur naturally are also a result of our collective karma. So the collective karma of all beings has an effect on the natural resources that we experience in this world that we live in. So each being can enjoy a portion of this natural material resource, but how much we can use will depend on our past lives' karmic forces and the efforts applied in this present life as well. So if we go back and think of the analogy of a farmer sowing seeds and tending to those seeds, the seeds are like our past karmic forces. Now, if they are present, it means we have the potential to reap a harvest. But the seeds alone are not enough. So the farmer needs to irrigate the fields, remove the weeds, and protect the crop from damaging frost and invading pests and so on. And these tasks are like the present life efforts to get an education, to develop skills, and to work an honest job and so forth. So in summary, happiness in our human existence requires fulfillment of material necessities, and this fulfillment is the basic and prime wish of all beings, which is very reasonable. To realize this happiness from material necessities, we need to have wholesome acts of generosity from past lives as the cause, as well as creating the conditions for those past karmic forces to ripen in this life. So material necessities are the basis for establishing harmony in this human realm and also form the foundation for the practice of the transcendental path. So if a person is so poor that they can barely survive, there is no way for them to even consider how to establish harmony because their main priority is, where is my next meal going to come from? So they're too concerned with their own survival. They can't really pay any attention to the idea of, where am I going to go to learn the Dharma? Who am I going to learn it from in that sense? So when the Buddha teaches sentient beings, he would first praise the meritorious results of generosity and encourage people to undertake more deeds of generosity so that they can avoid the suffering of poverty in future lives. Now, the different vehicles practice generosity in different ways. The practice of generosity in the five-vehicle path, and this mainly focuses on the human and heavenly vehicles. The practice of generosity for these practitioners primarily relate to giving material things. Now, the next verse points out the requirements to fulfill an act of giving. So the verse says, generosity requires letting go and bringing benefits. The motives of compassion and respect have different targets. Aspects of intention, audience, and item given determine the difference in the superiority of the resultant virtue. So any act of giving must meet two major conditions. The first condition is that we need to be willing to let go. We must have a mind that is happy to give up this item to someone else. For example, if someone borrows your things and then they are unable to return it or they lose it, this is kind of a forced situation where you have to give it up. So if you feel a bit like, I wish I didn't lend it to him in the first place or so forth, that is not an act of letting go. Even though you physically let go because the item's gone, in your mind, you have not actually let go. So that does not constitute an act of generosity. Even if out of politeness, you may say to your friend, okay, that's fine, don't worry about it. But deep down inside, if you're telling yourself, I better not lend him or her anything again. So that is not an act of generosity. Now, the next major condition is benefits. So namely, when you give something to others, whether the receiver is a person, an animal, or an organization or so forth, that act must bring the receiver benefits. So an example in this case is person A gives person B some illicit drugs with the aim of harming them, then such giving cannot be deemed as an act of generosity as well, because there is no benefit. Even though, A has given something to B, but it brings no benefit to B. So in short, the definition of acts of generosity embodies the meaning of willingness and self-sacrifice of one's own happiness to help others achieve happiness. The spirit of generosity is to benefit others at one's own expense and to do so willingly. The Mahayana emphasizes benefiting others first, and therefore it highly values this virtue of generosity. Now, concerning the acts of generosity, we need to consider two aspects. So one aspect is the motive for carrying out acts of generosity, and the other is the target audience. In terms of motive, one motive is compassion. Now, this is where one carries out acts of generosity with a mind of compassion and empathy. So such acts could be targeted to those who are lonely, destitute, widows and orphans, or those who are afflicted by medical conditions, various illnesses, deformities, or those impacted by natural disasters, caught in wars, conflicts, or even like, an animal that who's about to be put down for no other reason that is viable. So all these acts of generosity to help these type of beings is akin to modern day charitable services. So this is where the motivation stems from compassion. The second is the motive is out of respect. And this is where one carries out acts of generosity with a mind of respect. And this also includes the aim of repaying gratitude. So such acts include filial piety towards one's parents, supporting and adhering to the words of elders and teachers, and making offerings and paying respects to the Triple Gem. So depending on the motive of compassion or respect, each has their different target audience. So when we talk about generosity and acts of generosity, often you will also hear about what are the merits that you can gain from it. Now, in terms of the merits, it varies, and there are various determiners or aspects. And these can be summarized into 3 aspects. So the first aspect is the difference in the intention. And this refers to the degree of sincerity, whether one's motive is compassion or respect, or if one does not have the motive of compassion or respect at all. So the resultant merit from the very same act of giving can be different simply due to a difference in the intention. The second aspect is the difference in the field of merit, or basically who you're actually giving to. So the field of merit refers to, we refer to it as a field, and the analogy is often, you're planting a seed in that field. So you plant your seed of generosity. Now, for people who are poor or sick, they fall into the field of compassion, while parents, the Triple Gem, and teachers, they fall into the field of respect. Now, within each of these fields, there are, in a sense, hierarchies. So in the field of respect, there is a hierarchy in that, if you give to your parents, the merits that you gain is better than giving to someone that is not as close to you. But vice versa, in the field of respect, when you're making offerings to the Triple Gem, if the offering you make is to someone who has already attained, say, the first fruition of an arahat, the merit gained would be lesser than if you had given to someone who had attained the second or a higher level of fruition. So in that respect, there is a bit of a hierarchy depending on how, I guess, how well practiced or the level of attainment or enlightenment that the practitioner has attained. So similarly, if you're making offerings to bodhisattvas, in a sense, for most of us as Mahayana monks and nuns, when we take our full ordination, we also have to take the bodhisattva vows. And so once we've taken the bodhisattva vows, we are considered bodhisattvas. But, in terms of, we're like newborn bodhisattvas compared to the great bodhisattvas like Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. So in that respect, if you make an offering to bodhisattva monks and nuns, the merit gained would not be as much as if you had made an offering to a bodhisattva that had attained a higher level of achievement in their practice. So bear in mind that there is hierarchical differences within these fields. And among the merits to be gained, acts of generosity, of course, the most superior field would be to make offerings to a Buddha in that sense. So similarly, when we look at the field of compassion, again, there are differences in the merit depending on how pitiful the target is. So, for example, if you have a youth who is in the prime of their life but is simply lazy and doesn't work, and because of their own laziness, they are in a state of poverty. So, such a person, of course, is pitiful and, you know, in a sense, they do need our help. But making offerings and to help that lazy, youthful person, the merit gained would not be as much as if you were to make offerings to help someone who was disabled, sick, or weak. So someone whose poverty is basically not largely a result of their own decision in that sense. So when we carry out acts of generosity, given that, of course, our financial abilities are limited, if you want to maximize your merits in this sense, so this is a very, you know, some people, when they talk about giving, they would like to say that, you know, we shouldn't be so calculative and think about it. But from another perspective is, you know, our resources are limited. So when you're carrying out acts of giving, if you want to kind of maximize your merits, then you need to consider these aspects. And the third aspect is the actual item that you give. So whether the merit is great or small, the quality and quantity of the item you give also affects, you know, how much merit is gained from that particular act. So in this respect, the obvious example is, and this story also is mirrored in the Bible as well. You have a very rich person who donates $1 million. And then you have a very poor person who only has $1 in their pocket and they donate that to the same cause. So everything is the same except for the fact that the $1 to the poor person is all they have. But the $1 million to that rich, wealthy person is like loose change. So the merit that the millionaire, billionaire would gain from donating $1 million would not be as much as the poor person who gave up and donated willingly his or her $1. So therefore, the quality and quantity of the item, in a sense, is also relative to the giver's personal situation. So the next verse tries to capture this, and it says, avoid insincere giving and cultivate generosity properly. Do not give unwillingly, out of fear, or to repay gratitude. Do not give out of habit or seek return of favors. Do not give to seek blessings from gods or for fame. So, acts of giving that are insincere or ignoble should be avoided, and instead one should cultivate generosity properly and in accordance with the Dharma teachings. Now, what makes an act of giving insincere and contrary to the meritorious actions of generosity? The answer is in the third and the last line of the verse. And here it's basically telling us there are basically 7 do nots when it comes to acts of generosity. So the first is do not give unwillingly. And this is where one's intention is not self-motivated. So, for example, someone comes to your door and begs for certain things or shows up at your home and you feel pressured to give or you feel embarrassed to reject their request. Therefore, you do give them things or you do fulfill their request, but you have reluctance and you feel that, after you've carried out this act of giving, it actually leads to feelings of vexation, unease, and so forth. So this is when you're giving unwillingly. So this is something that you should not do. The next is do not give due to fear. So this is where you feel that your wealth or status or your life is in danger and you fear that you will lose everything. So consequently, you carry out acts of generosity with the hope that the merits from such acts will help you avoid the misfortune or the bad downturn or the bad situation. Now, such intentions are not uncommon among some ordinary Buddhist. And a really funny story is of Eva Eyre, which is a story I heard from a friend, and she works as a air hostess, and she told me that the big boss, the owner of the airline, had each year they asked fortune tellers to kind of give a bit of a fortune reading for the company. And supposedly the company was going to have a massive downturn in a particular year. So the boss basically made every staff, so you're looking at thousands of people, the whole workforce had to go vegetarian for that whole year. So that was, the business owner's way of trying to counter the predicted downturn. So that type of a giving in this case, it's giving of life, because you might be thinking, well, being vegetarian, how is that an act of generosity? Because the idea was, well, if they're all vegetarians, they won't be taking the lives of, chickens, fish, and so forth for a whole year. So that was the act of giving life. Apparently it worked. The downturn didn't come about, but that is, a live example of giving out of fear. Number 3 is do not give simply to repay gratitude. Now, this situation is when someone has done you a favor and you then carry out an act of generosity with the mindset of repaying that kindness. Now, this is not necessarily bad, because you might be thinking, what's wrong with helping someone who has helped you? There are social and cultural etiquettes where you do kind of repay that type of kindness. So, someone gives you a gift, you give them a gift in return, and so forth. But in terms of this aspect of giving in a pure sense, this is not so good, because there is still a motive. There's like a prerequisite. You must have done something to help me before I'm going to help you back. So in that sense, it's not so pure. The act of generosity is not so pure. Yes, Patricia.
But what if the act comes in a natural way? For example, if somebody has helped you and you happen to kind of think the money, and you are so grateful that person has helped you. So your intention is to share what you have. Is that good giving?
Well, like I said, this particular one, there's a bit of a grey area, because, again, the intention in your example is, I think it would say the person is habitually a kind person and knows to be grateful to people who have helped them. And so out of habit, they would then want to help and share when their situation allows them to. What I'm talking about here is the examples here are where, someone has helped you out in a certain way, and of course you kind of feel like you owe them a debt, and therefore you feel like you need to do something to give them back. So there's a bit of a slight difference in terms of the feeling. So if you think about it, you feel like you owe them a debt and you need to repay that debt. So this is the type of repaying gratitude that is not as pure. Yeah. So the fourth is do not give out of habit. So some people do not really have the mindset of generosity, but they still make offerings to the Triple Gem periodically, or they donate to charities because this is a family custom and so forth. And over time, this just becomes a habitual practice. And so it doesn't really stick in your mind, so to speak, that you want to do something good. So an example of this was my friend, have you heard of World Vision, the charity World Vision, where you pay them $30? So the advertisement is $1 a day is all it takes to support a child in a poverty-stricken country. So you make a $30 donation every month, and that money is largely going to sponsor one child on your behalf. And so you make a connection with that child. And my friend just put it onto auto debit on their credit card. And because that the child that they sponsor was probably too young in order to write and communicate with her, over time she had completely forgotten she'd even, and one day she was looking and she goes, what's this $30 that keeps coming out of my account? So for her, that's become habitual to just put things onto direct debit and then it's a set and forget. But, it just means she's lost that connection with the intention of giving. So giving out of habit is not something we should cultivate.
Mindless generosity.
Yeah, so I mean, there is.
But it's still
there is a bit of merit, she gains because she has given money and it has benefited. But because of her intention is missing, then of course the merit she gains would be largely reduced in that sense. So the next one is do not give with the intention to gain something in return or to seek favors. So some people carry out acts of giving, but what they really want is that they want the receiver to return them a favor or to help them out or to sacrifice something in return. So it's for this reason only that they perform this so-called act of giving. And therefore, it's not a pure act of generosity. And this is the type of generosity we should avoid. Now, the next one, the 6th, is to do not give to seek blessings from the gods. Now, this is where one performs acts of giving or offerings to the heavens or to a deity, a god, with the aim of pleasing that god to gain certain blessings or hoping to be born in the heavens in the future. And this is actually quite common in the Chinese culture. So often you'll see people go to the temples and they'll have roast pig and roast chicken and all this on the offering table, and then they'll start listing out their wish list. So it's a bit like, little kids writing their letter to Santa in a sense. So that's, giving to seek blessings from the gods, which is something we should avoid. And the last one is do not give to seek fame. So some people give or carry out acts of giving for the sake of fame. And there are people who have no choice but to give when they're in front of a crowd because they need to maintain their public image. I'm a generous person. So at a charity ball, you feel like you have to give just to maintain that image. So giving to seek fame is a type of generosity we should also avoid. So these types of acts, in one sense or another will bring some benefit to the receiver eventually. But in terms of, are they wholesome acts of generosity? Are they pure acts of generosity? No, they're not. So these so-called generous acts can result in some merits. However, they are poles apart from the true meaning of generosity according to the Buddha Dharma. Now, the next verse says, restrain oneself to benefit others, uphold the pure precepts steadfastly with tolerance. So this is indicative of moving the discussion from the meritorious practice of generosity. Now we're heading to the meritorious practice of upholding the precepts. So the practice of generosity mainly focuses on giving up personal belongings, personal items to benefit others. And this is highly virtuous and a worthy practice. Nonetheless, it is not all that difficult a task to carry out. The key purpose of the Buddha Dharma is to teach us to cease unwholesome deeds and to perform wholesome deeds so that we can purify our body and minds. Therefore, compared to the sacrifice of personal belongings, what is even more superior is the practice of upholding the precepts. So we're at 49. There's 10 minutes left. Do you have any questions or may I continue? I'll continue?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so in terms of the practice of upholding the precepts, this is to restrain our own personal desires such that eventually it becomes a virtuous practice that can bring forth happiness and peace in this world. Now, in other words, it is a practice of restraining oneself to benefit others. So again, the aim is to bring benefit to others when we practice the precepts. Take, for example, upholding the precept of no stealing. So it does not mean that we abstain from stealing just for today or tomorrow. It does not mean that we don't steal from the Smiths, but it's okay to steal from the Jones. It does not mean when we uphold the precepts, we will say we're not going to steal for just a certain point of time. For those who have taken the 5 precepts, if you remember, the commitment is for life until the end of this life. So when we uphold the precept of no stealing, we are basically making a commitment to not steal from anyone or any being until the end of our life. So in this way, if we look at it from a reverse aspect, it's making a commitment to help people protect their belongings and not harm them by taking away their belongings and so forth. So when we uphold the precept of no stealing, it means we're giving assurance to other people that we're not going to infringe upon them or we're not going to damage their possessions and threaten their possessions in any way. So if someone knows that you're upholding the precepts, the 5 precepts, then it gives them comfort, it's okay to be with this person. I can leave my computer in this room, in this building, because I know everybody here practicing the precepts will not damage my property. So it creates an environment of security and safety, and that is also a form of intangible giving. So another example is the precept of no sexual misconduct. So when we decide to take up this precept, it doesn't mean that it only applies to certain persons, it applies to everyone. So when we uphold this precept, it means that from now until the end of this life, we will not use any methods whatsoever, whether it be by seduction or by force to destroy other people's chastity and to bring basically chaos to their family. So again, if you know the people around you are upholding this precept, it creates a further sense of security that not only are your possessions safe because they're upholding the precept of no stealing, you know that your well-being is also safe because they're upholding this precept of no sexual misconduct. Now, when we reflect on the 5 precepts in this way, then we can understand that the Buddha praises the 5 precepts as the 5 great acts of generosity. And such virtuous acts of benefiting others is definitely more superior to any ordinary act of giving material things, which may only last for one instance. So even though we talk about generosity, often we will talk about, okay, you can give material things, you can give the Dharma, which is intangible, but the practicing of the precept is also a way that we can give. We can give security to the people around us. We can give them assurance and comfort as well. So one who practices upholding the precepts must restrain their personal desires, and therefore they must have a steadfast determination and be able to tolerate all sorts of challenges. Now we need to, I'm talking about it in the assumption that we've all taken the 5 precepts. So we need to tolerate difficulties, distress, threats, compulsion, and enticements from, the external environment that may entice us to break the precepts. We also need to tolerate mental cravings and prevent these mental cravings from getting out of hand and manifesting in physical or speech. So at the extreme, we must have the determination to die as a result of upholding the precepts than to break the precepts in order to live. So that goes back to what I mentioned earlier about having, right view of wholesomeness, unwholesomeness, and karma and cause and effect, where when you're faced with a life and death situation, are you going to break the precepts to survive, or are you willing to uphold the precepts in absolute purity, even if it means you die? So having a steadfast determination and being able to tolerate such difficulties, we can then restrain our personal cravings and overcome temptations from the external environment. And in this way, when we uphold the precepts, we can ensure that our practice of the precepts is as pure as possible. And this means that we will not break the precepts and we will not allow the efforts of many years of our precept practice to be lost in a moment of weakness. So just a single breach of the precepts can destroy all the efforts from our past practice of upholding the precepts. And this is like a person who has obeyed the law all their life, but with a single moment of weakness, they contravene the law, and as a result, they have to face the consequence of jail. So when we talk about upholding the precepts, some people, do feel that, oh, this is a very heavy topic because it means I can't do this, I can't do that, and so forth. But if we flip it around and think about it in terms of this is another way I can practice giving and generosity. I don't have a lot of money, but I've got willpower, I've got determination to stop myself from doing all these bad things and offer the people around me, comfort to make them feel safe in my presence. That is another special way that we can offer giving as well.
Creating a mess response.
Exactly. So upholding the precepts is something that I personally am very pro precept. So, but not in a very strict way. So you have people that are very like you have those who lean towards the Vinaya practice, but they can be very rigid in terms of, oh, you two can't sit together because you're female and you're male. The precept doesn't allow it. You know, there's that type of rigidity with someone holding the precept. But I think that we're looking at the human, the heavenly vehicle. So we're looking at the 5 precepts. We'll go through the main precepts, which are the 5 precepts, the 8 precepts, and the 10 wholesome precepts. We'll go through that in the next lessons. But just to wrap up for this lesson, in terms of upholding the precepts, it really helps us to reflect on what are our habits, and are these habits beneficial to our practice. If we're serious about our practice, then we start to review, in a sense, you know, what are the areas we need to make amends with, and which precept actually can help us tackle that the best. And that's also a way that the practice of the precepts, not only does it project outwards in terms of benefiting others, it can also project inward to help us, you know, progress in our practice as well. So I'll leave I'll end this particular talk here. This evening's class is a more relaxed environment. So this evening I will not be continuing with this topic for the 8 o'clock class.